Imagine standing on a windswept beach in the dead of night. You are one of 80 men. Behind you, a small island of fishermen and farmers sleeps peacefully, unaware that the world is about to end. In front of you, the Black Sea stretches into nothing, and then, slowly, shapes begin to emerge from the darkness. One ship, then 10, then 50, then hundreds. 900 vessels, carrying 30,000 soldiers from the most terrifying military machine the world has ever known, are sailing directly toward you. You have no reinforcements coming, no castle walls to retreat behind, no cavalry reserves waiting in the hills. Just 80 mounted samurai, a handful of peasants with sharpened sticks, and the cold certainty that by tomorrow, almost every single one of you will be dead. This is not a movie. This is not a video game. This is the real story of the Battle of Tsushima and what actually happened on that island in November 1274 is far more brutal, far more tragic, and far more terrifying than anything fiction has ever dared to show you. The man standing at the front of those 80 warriors was So Sukkuni, the elderly deputy governor of Tsushima Island. He had spent his entire life defending this remote outpost in the Korea Strait, a jagged, mountainous sliver of land covered in dense forest, sitting almost perfectly between Korea and Japan. The island's population was roughly 5,000 souls, most of them simple fishing families who had never seen a battlefield. Sukkuni's entire military force amounted to about 80 mounted samurai, and perhaps another 100 or so peasant conscripts armed with little more than spears and farming tools. That was it. That was the sum total of Tsushima's defense. And when scouts reported the approaching fleet, Sukkuni knew exactly what it meant. He had heard the warnings. He had read the intelligence from the mainland. The Mongols were coming, and Tsushima, because of its geography, would be the very first place they would hit. But before we watch what happens next, you need to understand why 30,000 soldiers were sailing toward Japan in the first place. To grasp the sheer weight of what was bearing down on that tiny island, you have to zoom out and look at the world in 1274. The Mongol Empire was, at that point, the largest contiguous land empire in human history. 12 million square miles of conquered territory stretching from the forests of Poland to the coastline of Korea, from the frozen wastes of Siberia to the burning sands of Syria. Genghis Khan, the man who started it all, had been dead since 1227, but his grandson Kublai Khan had taken the empire to new heights. By the 1270s, Kublai controlled all of China, all of Korea, and vast networks of territory connected by the most efficient military communications system the medieval world had ever seen. Kublai did not look at Japan and see a military threat. He looked at Japan and saw an island that had the audacity to refuse him. And in the world of Kublai Khan, refusal was not an option. The diplomatic breakdown had been building for nearly a decade. In 1266, Kublai sent envoys to Japan carrying a letter that was polite in tone, but unmistakable in meaning. Submit, become a vassal state, send tribute, or face consequences. Japan's response was silence. Complete, utter silence. More envoys arrived in 1268. The Kamakura Shogunate, led by the young and fiercely proud regent Hojo Tokumun, found the demand insulting beyond measure. A reply was reportedly drafted, but never actually sent. In 1271, yet another Mongol diplomatic mission arrived on Japanese soil, and this time the reception was openly hostile. The samurai detained the envoys, denied them any audience with officials of rank, and ordered them off the island. One diplomat, A man named Zhao Liangbai allegedly waited 2 full years for a formal response that never came. When he finally returned to China in 1273, he reportedly told Kublai Khan that the Japanese were contemptible and not even worth the effort of conquering. Kublai disagreed. To him, Japan's silence was not indifference. It was defiance. And defiance, in the Mongol worldview, demanded punishment. In April of 1274, Kublai Khan ordered an invasion fleet constructed in Korea. 900 ships, 30,000 fighting men drawn from Mongol cavalry, Korean infantry, Chinese soldiers, and Jurchen warriors. It was a multinational war machine designed to crush resistance before it even had time to organize. Japan knew an invasion was likely. Shrines and temples across the country were ordered to pray for divine protection. The Kamakura government shifted its focus to coastal defense, especially around Kyushu. Watchtowers went up. Local lords mobilized their forces. But Tsushima, isolated and exposed in the middle of the strait, was essentially left to fend for itself. 80 samurai against 30,000 invaders. The math was not just unfavorable, it was a death sentence. When the first Mongol ships appeared off the coast on November 4, 1274, Sukkuni did what any honorable commander of his era would do. He sent a small boat carrying 4 samurai toward the fleet. Their mission was not to attack. It was to negotiate, to formally ask the invaders to identify themselves and state their intentions. This was standard protocol in Japanese warfare, a civilized ritual that had governed conflict on the islands for centuries. The samurai expected to be met with words. Instead, they were met with arrows. Before the 4 men could even open their mouths, the Mongols opened fire. 2 of them died instantly. A third was struck in the throat as he desperately tried to turn the boat around. The lone survivor barely made it back to shore alive. In that single moment, everything the samurai understood about war was shattered. These invaders did not follow the rules. They did not announce themselves. They did not seek honorable combat. They simply killed. Sukkuni deployed his 80 mounted samurai along Komoda Beach and prepared to fight the only way he knew how. Traditional samurai warfare was built around individual glory. A warrior would ride forward, announce his name and lineage in a booming voice, challenge a worthy opponent, and engage in personal combat. Victory was measured in individual kills, in the honor of facing a named enemy and defeating him. It was a system designed for battles between Japanese lords, fought by men who shared the same cultural codes. It was absolutely, catastrophically unsuited for what was about to happen. The Mongols did not land as individuals. They came ashore in tight, disciplined formations, moving as coordinated units under centralized command. Gongs and drums dictated their movements, signaling advances, retreats, and flanking maneuvers with a precision the samurai had never encountered. When Japanese archers fired their opening volleys, expecting to thin the enemy ranks, the Mongol infantry simply raised portable shields and kept advancing. The samurai had never seen anything like it. Infantry moving behind mobile cover as a single organism. And then the Mongols answered with arrow volleys of their own, not individual shots aimed at specific targets, but massive coordinated barrages that darkened the sky. Japanese sources would later describe those arrows falling as heavy as rain. But the arrows were not the worst of it. Some accounts, notably the Soi Kafu, claim that many of those Mongol arrows were poisoned. Even a scratch, even a minor wound that a samurai might normally shrug off, could prove fatal within hours. And then came the thing that broke them. a sound like thunder, a flash like lightning. Iron devices hurled through the air that shook heaven and earth when they struck the ground. The samurai on Komoda Beach were experiencing gunpowder weapons for the first time in Japanese history. These were not crude firecrackers. Japanese sources, including the Nihon Koku Jokushi and the Hachiman Gurokun, describe explosions powerful enough to stun horses, shatter formations, and leave warriors temporarily deaf and blinded. Modern archaeology has confirmed these accounts. Researchers examining Mongol bombshells recovered from underwater sites off Japan's coast have X-rayed the devices and found gunpowder packed tightly with scrap iron, crude but effective shrapnel bombs designed to maim and terrorize. For men who had spent their entire lives training with swords and bows, who had never heard an explosion louder than a thunderclap, the psychological impact was devastating. Centuries of military tradition, centuries of certainty about what battle was and how it worked, were obliterated in a single afternoon. But here is the thing about the samurai on that beach. They did not run. Despite the bombs, despite the poisoned arrows, despite the overwhelming numbers, So Sukkuni and his men kept fighting. One samurai named Sukusada, according to the So Clan Chronicle, personally killed 25 enemy soldiers in close combat before he was finally brought down. 25 kills in a single engagement against an army of thousands. Whether the number is precise or slightly embellished by proud family records, the fact remains that these men fought with a ferocity that defied all logic and all odds. But personal heroics, no matter how extraordinary, could not change the strategic reality. 80 men cannot hold a beach against 30,000. By afternoon, the Mongols had secured their beachhead. They were landing at multiple points around Tsushima simultaneously, overwhelming the island's meager defenses from every direction. As darkness fell, Sukkuni gathered what remained of his mounted warriors and organized one final cavalry charge. It was not a tactical decision. It was a decision to die fighting. The remaining samurai rode directly into a force that outnumbered them roughly 100 to 1. They were cut down by arrows, torn apart by explosions, overwhelmed by disciplined infantry formations they could not break. Sukkuni died. His sons died. His retainers died. Every last one of the mounted defenders of Tsushima died on that beach or in the fields and forests just beyond it. What followed was 3 days of systematic destruction. The Mongols did not simply occupy Tsushima. They made an example of it. Villages around Komoda Beach were reduced to ash. Homes were set ablaze with families still trapped inside. Survivors who fled into the dense mountain forests were hunted down by Mongol cavalry patrols. The invaders moved through the island like a fire, burning everything, killing anyone who resisted, and capturing anyone who could not escape. Japanese historical sources are reluctant to describe the full extent of what happened during those 3 days, but fragments from later accounts paint a picture of organized, deliberate terror. Women were taken captive, particularly younger women, and subjected to systematic assault. This was not random battlefield violence. It was calculated brutality designed to send a message. Some prisoners were pierced through the palms of their hands with wire and hung alive from the sides of Mongol ships. Fishermen from nearby islands would later report seeing vessels leaving Tsushima with captives dangling from the hulls, still alive, screaming, begging for death. The Mongols did not stay on Tsushima. Permanent occupation was never the goal. The goal was demonstration. The goal was to show Japan, and anyone else watching, that resistance against the Mongol Empire was not just futile, but would be punished with a savagery that would haunt generations. They imposed temporary martial law, severed the island's communication lines to the Japanese mainland. And once the message had been carved into the smoking ruins of every village on the island, they sailed on toward their next objective. Tsushima was not a battle. It was a warning written in blood and fire, and the rest of Japan was about to read it. So now I want to hear from you. Knowing what really happened on Tsushima, knowing the scale of the brutality, and the impossible courage of 80 men who chose to fight rather than flee, what do you think about this first chapter of the Mongol invasion of Japan? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. And if this story gripped you the way it gripped me when I first researched it, hit that subscribe button, because the story of what happened next, when the Mongol fleet reached the mainland, is even more extraordinary. I will see you in the next one.